You know what? I don't know about that ending. Hello, everyone. I'm author Aurel Raintree. This is Reels and Reads, where I give honest reviews and occasional spoilers. Judge Stone, written by Viola Davis and James Patterson, is my first, I'd say, crime novel or detective novel since, oh my goodness, like since Dean Koontz Whispers, and I don't really remember anything about it. I love true crime. I love watching crime shows, but something about reading about crime and court dramas and things like that, I don't know. It's dull to me. I really wish I could understand why. So the fact that I picked up this book is a big deal. Now, it had this really ugly 50% off sticker from Barnes& and Noble. But what I discovered is if you're like me and you like to remove the book covers when you read, because these, as you can see, it's already slipping out of the book. I don't like for my book covers to get damaged. So I take them off. And I guess apparently by letting it roll around my bedroom like that, the sticker just peeled off on its own. So, if you're having trouble, maybe just take the cover off. Anyways, this is what the book looks like. And let me see if I can show you without covering up the picture. I can tell you that picture is definitely a spoiler once you've read it. So let's give you the synopsis of the book, shall we? So this book is about the title person, Judge Stone. Judge Stone, and this is in Alabama, by the way, is a no-nonsense judge. She used to be an attorney herself, so she has a certain way that she likes things to be done. She's very by the book for the most part, and she's one of those people that's very stoic, and she prides herself on being stoic. So she presides over pretty much the only courtroom in town. This is a small town. It's got like one motel, no hotels. It's not a big town. Like Fresno, California is probably bigger and more established than this town. She sees all kinds of cases. Apparently she sees, divorce cases and, restraining order cases. Again, this is a small town, so she handles all of the court cases. Whereas in a larger town, you got separate judges for separate things like family court, small claims, etc. Now, along comes this case across her desk, which is about abortion. Now, this is present day, so abortion is illegal in Alabama. There is no exception for, sexual assault or incest, or I think the only exception is like if the mother's life is in danger, you have no choice. Like the mother's dying and, you can only save one, then they would allow you to not save the baby in order to save the mother. Now, in this case, the mother is a 13-year-old girl named Nova Jones, and no, she was not pregnant by choice, which is a given. She's 13. That's kind of common sense. This isn't one of those two teenagers who are exploring sexuality and oops, that's very rare that happens at that age, but that didn't happen at all for this young lady. Now, the way this happens is she's at school and she's got all the symptoms of pregnancy. She keeps going to the nurse's office, and the nurse's name, and I'm probably going to mispronounce the first name, was Conchetta Bass. And she's like, pee on the stick, baby girl, pee on the stick, peas on a stick, and it's positive. She knows that this did not happen by choice, common sense, she knows that this 13-year-old girl cannot have this child. She comes from a single parent home where her mother is basically having her raise her siblings. She's one of those girls that's big for her age. We've all been told that at some point. She's one of those girls where, because she's big for her age, people automatically assume she's promiscuous and all of the things. And obviously someone decided to take advantage of her because of that. So she's already being forced to grow up when she shouldn't have to. So the school nurse thinks she's doing her a favor by getting her to Dr. Bria Jones. And this is the only doctor in town. Everybody knows this person. Everybody loves and trusts this doctor. The doctor, of course, says, no, I can't do it. It's illegal. And then it's kind of like, come on, like 13 years old, like, you need to do this. Talks the doctor into the abortion and everything's fine until there are complications thereafter. There's so much blood. Poor Nova has to go to the emergency room, and being a 13-year-old girl, afraid of her own shadow, obviously having been through a lot, she tells the truth as to what has happened to her. And that's how we get to the main plot of the novel, because Judge Stone has to decide whether or not the doctor has committed murder, or whether or not the doctor was doing what was necessary to preserve the life of the mother. I don't think I have to tell you how this polarized the town. People came all the way from Louisiana to, pro-life, pro-choice, pro-life, pro-choice. It is very, very on brand with things that are happening right now. I don't think that anybody reading this is going to have a hard time with the subject matter, but it is very intriguing, very interesting because of how current it is, how politically dialed in it is without being political. And what I mean by that is it doesn't take a side. It just presents you with a situation and shows you how this fictional judge is going to have to deal with it, how everything around this judge, everything around this town is affecting her and the decision that she must make as the person charged with making the decision. One of the things I liked about this book was Viola Davis's voice was all over it. Now, I don't do audiobooks, but I could hear Viola Davis's voice in my head as Judge Stone. You could hear her personality in this. You could see her acting this out. If you're one of those people like me who visualizes like this is a film in my head, 5 years from now, I'm going to have to remind myself this was a book I read and not a movie or a miniseries that I saw. But it had Viola Davis's style and voice all over it in the most wonderful way. Clearly, a Black woman from the South wrote this book. Nobody from California wrote this book, unless they had a family from the South. So her voice is all over this. There are certain nuances that only a dark-skinned Black woman could have picked up on. There are certain things like Nova being called fast, and it's just, there's so much, I can't even name it all, that lets you know that a dark-skinned Black woman from the South wrote this. I was able to identify with this. I mean, I understand that by today's standards, I'm no longer considered dark skinned, but as a child, I was considered dark skinned and I was much darker than this. And everything said to Nova had once been said to me. And although I'm not from the South, my family is from the South, and certain nuances, certain words and phrases that were said there, you got to be from the South to know exactly what she meant by that. It's nothing that'll get anybody lost, but I truly loved having Viola Davis's voice all over it, a true Southern, a true Black person. Honestly, just completely saturated the tone and style of this novel. I also loved how short the chapters were and how well paced the story was. The chapters don't drag on and on simply because they're still dealing with the matter. The chapters might end after a judge's thought process. A chapter might end after a certain incident happened in a courtroom, and then the next chapter is the judge leaving the courtroom. I do like that because, again, I'm not a person who reads crime dramas or detective novels, so it helped me continue to turn the page. And also for people who are intimidated by a 400-page book, it's about 419 pages. By seeing a new chapter every couple of pages, it keeps you turning. So whoever came up with that idea was smart enough to know that today's attention spans aren't that great. So having short chapters kept the pace going and kept the pages turning. But honestly, the story was so gripping, you don't want to put it down. When everyone says it's a book that you don't want to put down, they're not lying to you. Now, here are some things that I did not like. I found Judge Stone herself to be difficult for me to like. I don't think everybody is going to feel that way. This is speaking only for myself. I have a lot of experience in courtrooms. I have a lot of experience with, I've got a brother who's a lawyer. I was once asked to go to law school to become a judge by a judge. His name was Richard Nixon. Go figure. My own mother was a paralegal to help pay for, the rent at times. So I have a lot of experience with matters of court proceedings, etc. And a judge constantly getting off the bench to examine a witness just would not happen. Like an entire case would get thrown out for that. There is a point in time when Nova is on the stand talking about the assault, and it's not until Nova has a full-on breakdown that the judge has the wherewithal to clear the courtroom. If you're as experienced as a judge as you say you are in this novel, there is no way you didn't clear that courtroom before Nova even took the stand. So I found that really kind of unbelievable. The fact that the bailiffs weren't ready until after the judge got off the bench to come down and tell people like, hey, act right, So I just had a problem with the way the judge behaved in the courtroom. And when we come to the end of the novel, I have a problem with some open threads. Starla, which is Nova Jones's mother, is never really resolved. I already had a hard time coping with the fact that this poor girl had to testify all alone and how easily Starla would leave her daughter just unattended with these strange white people that she doesn't know. It's like, no wonder your daughter was attacked. Like, you treat her like she's your babysitter, not like she's a child in your care for whom you are responsible. She soaks up all of this attention and everything, but when the time comes to actually be a mother, she's not it. Now, that's not something I liked about a novel. That was actually something that was good about it, is how well Starla was written. But there was a thread left open. We know that Starla, sucked up all this attention in the media. We know that how, she got the church on her side. We know that she allowed her daughter to testify and that she was in the courtroom when Nova was testifying, like not in the room, but she was, in the building. But what happened after this? Because after, the trial is over, the story does continue. It's not like an epilogue or anything. There are more things that have to happen to complete the story, but we never find out what happens with Starla. We hear a little bit of what happens with Nova. We never get the full perspective of what happens with Nova. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but just say, obviously somebody had to get involved in Nova's life, but what happened with Starla? Because she's the mother. So that was a thread that was left unsewn. There's also a thread involving a character that we never meet named Abraham Stone. Now, I'm going to give you a warning. This might have a slight spoiler to it, but there comes a moment where there's a claim made on Judge Stone's property by way of a man named Abraham Stone. I'm going to keep it very minimal there. But we never know what happens. We never know if this is going to affect the judge's property. We never know who Abraham Stone was. They never resolved that situation with Abraham Stone. It just disappeared. And I kind of want to know, because I had my theories as to who Abraham Stone really was. Judge Stone gave us a theory, but I think my theory is better. But we never hear, what became of that. And lastly, the thing that I truly did not like is the ending. This is not to say that the ending was bad. This is to say that I would have done it differently. And what I mean by that is, I've said this before, I don't like pretty little bows. If the story is meant to end happily, if the story was meant to end on a positive note, by all means, end it that way. But the way this story was going, I'm not going to spoil it. I just want to say that just the way the story was going, this should have been a completely different ending. I'm not going to say whether it should be happier or sad. I'm just saying that the way the story was going up until we get to those last, because the chapters are really small, so maybe 2 or 3 chapters, if that. The last 10 to 15 pages, put it that way. Once we get to page 400, I can tell you that the way things were going, this ending should not have been what it was. I'm going to keep it at the bare minimum to not ruin it for anybody. I really needed the ending to be different, but I think that's more of a style or a preference for myself. I have not heard anyone else complaining about the ending, but I'm the one that's critiquing this, so that ending is definitely going to affect my rating. Now, this is where I'm definitely going to give you a spoiler, so I highly recommend that you skip forward to my rating, but this is probably the biggest egregious part of the novel for me, and that is Conchetta Bass. Again, spoiler alert, Conchetta Bass expires. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how, but she expires. My problem is that she is the star witness. Okay, it is because of Conchetta that Nova got the abortion. Okay, but when she's gone, we have no way to prove that Nova had an abortion. You see, Nova's statement was never sworn. There was no Miranda. She wasn't arrested, but her statement was never sworn. And the defense attorneys didn't get to cross-examine her. This is before we even get to court. This is preliminary hearings. She doesn't have a sworn statement. The prosecution didn't bother to show up at one point. So if Nova's statement isn't sworn, then it's as if Nova made no statement at all. And if Conchetta was the only one and who made a statement as to whether or not Nova actually had an abortion and how it all went down, because she basically turned state evidence against the doctor to save her own hide. But her statement wasn't sworn either. So if your star witness and the victim of the crime didn't have any sworn statements and the star witness is dead, then it's just the victim's word against the doctor's. And the problem I have with that is when they get to court, the prosecution wants to challenge its own witness to see if she even knows what an oath is. And my problem with that is if she doesn't know what an oath is, if you think that you need to challenge her to find out if she even knows what an oath is, that means that you doubt that she knows the difference between the truth and a lie. And if you doubt that your own witness, the victim of said crime, knows the difference between a truth and a lie, then why are we in court? Because if she doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie, then did she really have an abortion? Why is my client even on trial? So I had a problem with that. That was a big flaw in it. Why would you have the prosecution question its own witness's ability to comprehend a truth and a lie so that she could take an oath because they wanted to keep her off the stand? Why would you do that? Because if she didn't understand what an oath is, but just happened to know the difference between a truth and a lie, but it doesn't come out that way in her testimony, then you can't trust that she had an abortion. And now the defense can move for a dismissal. So I don't understand why they took it there and why that wasn't presented as a possibility. And then also by killing off Conchetta, it's like you have no witnesses. It really is the Nova's word against the doctor's. And who is the jury gonna believe at that point? I don't know. That just really, I don't know. It was a thorn in my paw. It was a thorn in my paw. And I think if I didn't have as much exposure to law, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't have caught that at all. So there's my spoiler for this book. My final rating for this book is 4 stars. I took half a star away for the legal improbabilities and lack of realism in certain spaces that actually mattered. Again, the judge questioning the witness on behalf of the defense, the judge getting off the bench, the judge walking around a courtroom yelling at people, the bailiffs not moving until the judge says so, and then her personality in general. Oh, and I forgot, the judge questioning a victim of a sexual assault in a room full of people. And then there's just her personality. The judge on the bench should not be the same person when she's off the bench, but she was the same person on the bench as she was off the bench. I wanted to see her with more personality, or at least a different personality when she came off the bench. And I didn't really get that. It was like pulling teeth from a crocodile to get to know who Judge Stone really was. She was stoic in the courtroom as well as off, and it made it hard for me to connect to her as a character. I really connected with Nova Jones. Everything happening to Nova was familiar to me. I knew what it was like to be talked to like that. I knew what it was like to be treated like that. Like, I think so many Black girls have felt what Nova Jones has felt. They did such an amazing job with Nova that I actually wanted more Nova and a lot less Judge Stone. I wanted to know more about Nova's personal life, Nola's experiences. If this had been more so about Nova's life, and then the judge just happened to be a character, like if this had been called Nova Jones instead of Judge Stone, I think I would have loved this novel so much more. The story around Nova as a person had so much more color to it than the story around Judge Stone. She was incredibly boring off the bench, and that was just something that kind of got to me. However, I love this book. It is a page turner. I did not put it down. I actually read this slower than I read other novels because I wanted to be drawn into the full environment. This was so familiar to me from when I go and visit my family in the South. So if you're from the South, you're really going to enjoy this novel. I recommend this to anyone who likes crime novels, anyone who is just kind of clued into what is happening in the United States today. It doesn't make you feel like you should choose a side, but it does give you the perspective of what it's like to have to be the person who is tasked with making the decision and ruling in a case that you know is wrong, but at the same time, you have to follow the law, whether you agree with the law or not. So let me know, did you guys read Judge Stone yet? Did you like it? Are you thinking that this might make a good film or a good miniseries? Let me know in the comments.